Take another breath. And as we breathe in life. The goodness of life. The abundance of life. We breathe in the regeneration, the continuity, the sustainability of life itself. So much is going on. So much vying for our attention. And we choose to remain upstairs in consciousness. We choose to remember. So in this moment right now, we give thanks. Opening up wide. So grateful to be here literally for such a time as this. May our energy be uplifting. May our thoughts, words, and deeds, our actions, our beliefs, may everything line up towards a most perfect will to bring forth the more perfect union.
Yes. Amen.
There's only one of us here. We know that. We come here to act like we know what we know. So we bless this time together, allowing it to unfold like life itself, good and very, very good. We get out of the way, we allow it to be, and so it is. Amen. Amen. So it sounds like there were a few check-ins that were going on. Anybody have any gratitudes that you want to share before we get started?
I'm Hallie. Hi, Reverend Race.
What's this different?
Oh, God, aren't we lucky not to be right in the midst of the fire? I'm really grateful for that. Where I live is reminiscent of LA, with the smog and the smoke and all of that. But, you know, I'm grateful to be breathing free. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for just life.
Good. Anybody online want to do expression of gratitude?
Absolutely. I am incredibly grateful to be on the other side of all of the processes of becoming licensed as a minister, and really incredibly grateful for this unique skill set that I have from past experiences that allowed me to stand in community with the folks up in Santa Rosa for the past week, feeding them informational updates that gave them accurate information, because you know, folks were just funneled into shelters with total strangers surrounded by a wall of sirens, and they had no idea what was actually going on. And having been a deputy and a firefighter and an EMT, I was able to pull out information directly off scanner channels and send it to them, and it really helped bring down anxiety and help folks feel connected. And just incredibly grateful to be able to do that.
Very good. Well, we thank you for that. He's referring to these, over this past week and a half, there have just been tremendous fires in Northern California, lots of evacuation, tremendous amount of damage, really unprecedented for us that the fires hit the urban areas. We're not unaccustomed to forest fires in California, but they typically are not so much, you know, impacting people and businesses, and it's been a lot of damage. A lot of displacement, confusions, evacuations, nothing in comparison to, say, Puerto Rico or some of the places hit by some of the hurricanes, which is everything was leveled and devastated. But it's very, very important that we have individuals, like you, Rev Rafe, and other people who are there. I also want to alert you and everybody listening to something new that just started that I'm very excited about. It's called Guardians Speak. Guardians Speak. And it's Guardians Speak Transforming the Badge. It's something that's been started by Cassandra Davies, one of our inner life practitioners, and Deb Bratsby, who are both former law enforcement officers. They both do prison outreach with us, and have actually, Cassandra is co-chair of our prison outreach, and have been so moved by their experience that they realize that a lot of the work that they need to do is on the outside with law enforcement, and that people who are in first responder kinds of positions, how much help they need, and how much traumas they suffer and don't have appropriate places and spaces to be able to heal, and then how that translates to the system, and how people are treated, within the system, itself, and trying to bring back some sanity and some humanity. It's a wonderful platform. It's a podcast. The first one came out yesterday. I'll make sure that we all have the link to it. I listened to it yesterday, and I'm just exceptionally pleased with the quality of it. And they're opening it up as a forum for people to talk, to share their stories, to basically build community and love up, on each other, because this kind of deep work takes a toll. It takes a heavy toll, on people. So sharing stories of successes, as well as, trials and tribulations, I think is a really good start. And I think these are folks that you would really like. So I will let you know about that. Yes, Nate.
The link is going to be on the Facebook, Inner Light Ministries Facebook page tomorrow.
Yeah, the link is going to be on our Inner Light Facebook page tomorrow. They're going to be having an event here at Inner Light. I think it's November 16th. And there will be a number of high-ranking law enforcement officials that will be here from different kinds of agencies, really helping to kick off that discussion, and it will be recorded as well and available. And I'll see what we can do to make sure that it's live streamed, because I'm sure a lot of folks would like to drop in to that. It's not our first soiree with having law enforcement here, but usually it's been over some other issue, whatever, youth incarceration or something like that. But this is the first time where the focus will be on them as an industry. Their own healing, their own issues. And that's kind of exciting. So, thank you to all of you, first responders and who are there. I always say that God wastes nothing. God wastes nothing. And literally every skill, every trial, tribulation, every job, your educational background, your family, your history, like everything is part of your own personal human capital wealth. And it will all come into play at some time or another, which is why it's extremely important for us not to spend a lot of time trying to get away from things. Because you never know how that particular skill set is going to show up someplace else. For example, you may be tired of teaching or being a teacher. Perhaps you don't wind up back in a formal classroom setting, but if you spent your time as a teacher and you have that skill set, and particularly if you actually enjoy teaching, but just don't like all the other stuff, administrative stuff or what that goes with it, I guarantee you that opportunities to teach, formally or informally, will still be in your future. And sometimes we actually miss some of our blessings and opportunities because we're so busy trying to get away from stuff. Makes sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very good. So why don't you tell us, Nate, who we have with us?
We have Reverend Rafe, we have Champion, and we have 408-348-7568.
Okay. So do any of you online or on the telephone want to check in? Gratitudes or visions, anything you want to share?
Champion is.
I'll share.
Okay.
So I'm just enjoying what you just said, Reverend Deborah. This is what I'm sitting with today. God can do something with everything I have ever considered a mistake.
Yes. Yes. Not can, but will.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, I love Ricky Byers' Beckwith song, No Mistakes in God.
Mm.
No mistakes in God. It all rolls in. Yeah. And that's so important because our naming it as a mistake is what prevents us from learning the lesson. Our naming it as a mistake is what prevents us from being able to transform it into fertilizer, into something that's going to increase the fertility of whatever's next. It's like the universe is one huge compost pile where even the crap is fertilizer to make sure that we're ready and ripe for whatever it is that comes next. It wastes nothing. It just wastes nothing. We know that matter is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes form. And once we really understand that, we can just allow whatever is in our life to change form, but it's not going to be like something else. It'll just be whatever it was in a different energy, in a different shape. That's what it is. I'm going to be speaking this week. As a matter of fact, I thought I was going to be there today for the pre-conference stuff at this conference in San Jose called the SAND Conference, Science and Non-Duality, 2017. And I like their logo. If you go online and look at their logo, they take Einstein's energy equals mass times a constant square, the famous E equals mc squared. And instead of E, they have the ohm symbol. And it's ohm, that energy equals mc squared. I really like that. And I'm looking forward to being able to have a couple of presentations there where I have a chance to talk about the oneness of everything. And the particular sessions that I'm doing, one on sacred activism, and then a couple of sessions around the topic that they invited me to submit something. And I'm doing it off of the spin of one of my sermons not too long ago, which is, what if I don't want to be one with them? The inconvenient truth of non-duality.
Mm.
It's basically around this premise that we know a lot of stuff. We even talk about, the oneness of everything and the sacred interconnectedness of life and, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to our practical application of that in human relations, particularly in those instances where we're coming up against confrontational things, oppositional things, or people we just don't like, or even loathe, sometimes we find it a challenge to apply these principles that we know so dearly to that.
Will Wilhelmina be showing up?
Actually, I don't know, but Wilhelmina's trying to creep up for another event in Santa Cruz. I think it's the 17th of November. Planet Santa Cruz is this big comedic stage, and it's my first time on a comedy stage, per se. And I'm pretty sure that Wilhelmina's cooking up a little something. I've been thinking about it, and I think it just started coming to me today. on what the piece is going to be. But you never know. You never know, because I just kind of slip into that tongue-in-cheek sarcasm kind of easily anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised if Wilhelmina didn't have a few things to say at the SAN conference. If she could come out at 10X Berkeley, she can come out at the Science and Non-Duality. Once she had permission to play there. And I actually was more nervous about that than I had been about anything in a long time as far as public presentation. And it went over exceptionally well. So she's made her debut. Anybody else have anything that they want to share online or in the room before we go further?
I would like to share something.
Yeah.
I had just come back to working with Second Harvest, and I thought Second Harvest is a food distribution event here at Innerlight, and I had wished that I had some Spanish speaker to be with me to help to relate to people, to help translate my prayers and whatever it was I was doing. And so nobody stepped forward until I stepped forward last Thursday. And just when I went to pray with people, I said, is there anybody here that would translate for me? Does anybody want to translate the prayer? And here comes this person, just comes up and says, I'll do it.
Great.
And it was just wonderful to step out and let somebody else step up and know that that's how it works.
Yes.
There's always somebody that's there.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that was my lesson, and just to keep asking.
Yeah. I feel like I learned a good one on that yesterday. We were with some developers that we've been talking to, in regards to our property, buying our property, and getting contract with them to do that, to build senior assisted living here. And they have a number of units in different places. And one of the first facilities to burn down in the larger Santa Rosa area was one of their units, one of their 72 unit facilities. I hadn't even realized the fires had started. So Monday last week, I'm getting a text about this, and another one of their facilities was very badly damaged. And it seemed daunting to me, and I was just thinking, what in the world do you do with that many people? What do you do? And when I asked them yesterday, this was their quote. They said there's a major competitor in their industry. If I'm not mistaken, I think they said their name was Belmont. This group was Oakmont. Belmont, who had built another facility, but got somewhere up in the region that they hadn't started filling up yet. And they immediately took 100. So the Belmont competitors took 100 of the Oakmont senior assisted living residents. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this particular facility was almost 100% memory care. Because that had been something that was really on my mind, that these folks are they've already downsized, they've given away everything, this is the last that they have. And then some of these folks who have dementia and everything else, and how incredibly disorienting, all of this must be. And when I heard that, I just smiled and I just said, God is good. There's just nothing that God can't do when you stand in all possibility. There's nothing that can't happen. Anything else anybody else wants to say?
I had several things on my mind and I couldn't choose, and then you said something about, God doesn't make mistakes. And last Monday we had our WOW meeting, which of course is the over 60 women meeting that we was here once a month. And the thing for the meeting was going to be talking about things that if you were 90 and you look back at your life, what would have been your regrets? And what can you do now to help you not have regrets? And I thought about that, and I thought, well, my life hasn't been a bed of roses. I went through a number of years hoping I wouldn't go past 40, because it didn't feel very good in my life. And then I went through a couple of years of feeling more actively suicidal and way past it now. But even considering that there were things in my life that I maybe didn't quite make the right decision, or made one that didn't fit other people around me, but I can't think of anything that I regret, that I really regret. And I thought, it almost seemed like, I don't know if I can share that, because the assumption was that we're going to be 90 and regret stuff. And the beautiful thing was that of those 8 or 10 women that were in that circle, almost all of them said the same thing. And, where they could see how the things that maybe hadn't been done quite right, either by them or someone else, had in some ways turned out to be at the very least of us. And I thought, we really are women of history.
Good. This is good. Very good. This idea about God wasting nothing, and the whole idea about regret. What I've come to learn is that it isn't necessarily always about what we have done. A lot of times it's about what we don't do. I rarely talk about this in public, but it is going to relate to for such a time as this, I promise. This out-of-body death experience that I had, that was the trigger or the catalyst for receiving these spirit letters. I was in Toronto at the Intercontinental Hotel. I was a presenter at the International Association of Business Communicators since circa 1995. And it was the most extraordinary thing. It was an awful time in my life. I mean, just like sucked a big one. And it was another one of those. I wasn't actively suicidal. I wasn't going to kill myself, but I was ready to be done. Just done with it. I was in a lot of pain. The partner that I was with at the time had just moved out. And I was in a lot of self-blaming and whatnot, because it was all my fault as far as I was concerned at that particular time. And I just was done. It was like just boom. And I was in a sauna. It was completely misty. And there was one light that was at the top. One of those, like a floodlight kind of thing. And I'm naked. And I remember I just lifted, and nobody else in there. And I remember I lifted my hands way up, like it's to look into the heavens. And it was like, just take me. It was this huge surrender. Like, I'm yours, God. I'm done. Not even gonna save me in this lifetime. Just, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. I'm beyond judgment. I'm just so ready to be whatever it is that you want me to be. I'm tired of running, all of that. And I could feel that sense of like going into the light. And I didn't physically die, but I had that out of death experience that people talk about. It was the most incredible thing. my life went in review.
Mm.
The only way I could describe it that would even be remotely close, and it wasn't this, but it's the only imagery that I can think of. You know, pre-digital, we used to have individual slides in a carousel. And you know, the carousel would go from one picture to another. And it was like that. It was like it was me out here looking in at a movie, a slideshow of my life. And it just showed me these different, very specific moments. And there was no judgment. There was no judgment like whatsoever. And yet every moment in this one was a moment when I consciously or unconsciously chose not to love as deeply as I could have loved. Most amazing thing. And nobody told me that's what it was. There was just something that was self-evident in the pattern. It'd be like somebody shows you a series of numbers and you're supposed to figure out what's the pattern in these numbers. That there was a theme in each of these moments. I can't tell you now, I don't remember whether it was like chronological or went in a chronological order, but it clearly was my life and these snapshots that spread a very wide range of my life. And at this particular moment, I'm 39, I guess. You know, I felt like I learned something. Well, there's a lot of things, but one of the things that kind of sits with me now was the commitment that I made. It felt like that same kind of opportunity of, okay, you could go on, or you could go back. In this sense that if I went back, I would show up differently. And in some respects, I feel that's what's going on in our society. In all of this upheaval, social political upheaval, it's like a death of sorts. And everybody's kind of scrambling to figure out what they're going to do. For some people, it's the sign of, okay, well, we can take over now. For other people, it's, oh, they're killing me. For somebody else, it's, oh, good. What needs to die is dying, and we can rise above the ashes. I mean, there's all these different, but everybody kind of knows we can't go back to what it was. Even in the Let's Make America Great Again, they're really not trying to recreate what had been, but to establish something new that has the flavor of the entitlements and the flavor of the, you know, control and you know, who's in, you know, who's leading things and who's prioritized. That was reflected, you know, of the past. And in this, we're getting glimpses of our past. Almost like a bad movie. Bad B movie that we've seen before. And so many of us are mad because I didn't like this movie the first time. You know, why are we seeing this movie again? And I see something else. reminds me of that moment in that spot where I'm looking at this landscape and saying, oh, each of these are times or moments, these snapshots of history that we're repeating again. Like snapshots of where we could have been kinder the first time around. We could have been more deliberate the first time around. We could have been more inclusive the first time around. And it's almost like there's this massive do-over if we would allow ourselves to get out of the judgment about it all. That's not to say that we're valueless, but there's a powerlessness that comes from judgment. Whether you're in the villain state or the hero state or the victimized consciousness, it's disempowering, the judgment. And we do have this massive opportunity to get back more into alignment. There was something, and I know I've mentioned this from time to time, but it really struck me, and then I'll open this up for comments. It was something that Barbara Bush said. I wasn't a particular fan of the Bush family, what can I tell you? Surprise! But be it as it may, this is when Barbara Bush was First Lady, and there'd been a lot of brouhaha at that moment about her being the speaker at the commencement ceremony of Wellesley College, this very prestigious Ivy League women's school. And the complaint was that she didn't have any qualifications, that she hadn't really done anything besides being the First Lady, and they didn't think that was sort of like good enough besides all of the division about the Bush family at that particular time. And she said a couple of things that I will never forget. In her own words, she basically said to everybody, get a life. Get a life. That in the last analysis, when you are taking that final breath, it won't matter to you the deals that you made, the deals that you didn't make. It's not your resume or your bank account that's going to make that much difference. She said, it won't even be the love that you didn't get that will weigh on you. Basically, on your deathbed, what will weigh on you the most is the love you didn't give. Is the love you didn't give. And 30 years now, being a spiritual counselor, I've seen it time and time again. It's, find my brother that I haven't talked to in 20 years. It's, get my son. They're not even, in those last days, they're not even trying to get anything from anybody anymore. Like they don't want to die with that love still in them that wasn't given. As an aside, the other thing she said at the end, which I thought was brilliant, and she was talking about people's careers, and she says, all you can do, anything you want to do, is one of you in the room here may decide to do what I did, and be the spouse and support, the President of the United States of America. She said, and I wish him well. And the place just exploded. It just exploded. Um, and I was channel surfing. I wasn't even trying to find that particular speech. It just, hit upon it, and I knew what the Bruval controversy of good speaking was. So I decided to tune in. But that notion about what you regret the most is the love that you didn't give. And that's where I think we are right now in the nation. It's not just about all the things we have done that need correction and amends, but the tremendous amount of caring, compassion, equity, justice. It's the stuff that's deep within us that we have yet to have given. That is that sense of urgency within us. I'll say this one last thing. I remember when I was working with a homeopath and getting different tinctures from hers, and some of them would feel like they were speeding me up. But there was it's just an impending anxiety. I can't even really name it. But I had associated that much intense emotion with trying to sort something out in my life. And when I talked to her, I'll never forget what she said. She said, it's not that. She says, this anxiety that you're feeling right now, you can stop looking for your emotions to why you're feeling this way. Because it just seemed like I was anxious beyond, there was nothing around to make me that anxious. I couldn't figure what the hell I was so anxious about. What was that in me? I'll never forget what she said. She said, that's not your past. She said, that's your future calling you. And I knew in that moment, boom, she was right. That anxiety is my future calling me. And I think that's a lot of where we are now as a society. We're looking at the angst as though it's reactionary to all the stuff that has been. But part of this unsettledness is the future calling. It's that something within us that knows we got a second chance here to do some stuff that we didn't do before. Let's not squander that chance.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
Any comments? Is this resonating? It's a bit abstract, but is it resonating?
Yeah.
Did you want to say something?
Definitely. I'm working with a practitioner with the modality, and he said the same because I told him I've been feeling really anxious lately. And I kept looking around for the cause, and I couldn't find it. And I do a lot of deep inner work. And I'm very much in tune, and always have been, with my environment, with the universe, with people. I'm empathic as well. And I said, it's very likely I'm picking it up from others, because there's a lot of anxiety going around. And he said, I know what it is, Kathy. He said, it's your future calling you. And it's not clear yet, but that's what it is. And I just let go of a big sigh, because I knew that was right. He hit it right on the head. It was the correct indicator. And yeah, definitely can relate. Another thing that happened today was when Reverend Ray said something about calling up one of my favorite, Wilhelmina. And I had been thinking about Wilhelmina and wondering why you haven't let her loose in Sundays in the sermons. And I missed her because I can relate. And other people have talked about how they can relate to Wilhelmina. So I was thinking of it the minute you mentioned it. And when you talked about composting, I was thinking of that too. So my abilities are coming back with it. And it's a bit scary. I have to admit, it's a bit scary because I had been covered up for quite some time. And I could also relate to, and thank you, by the way, for sharing that experience. When you, that out-of-body experience that you had, I could relate very much to that. I had a couple of similar ones. And it's all clearing up. It's all coming back. And this thing about the future, I think it's hitting a lot of people and they don't realize it. They're about the inside.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you.
Champion says in the chat says congratulations.
I'm sorry, I'm congratulating Rafe on his new title.
Oh, okay.
So I was trying to back channel with him, but anyway.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment or respond?
Yeah, this whole unrest and all of the stuff that's going on, one of the things that keeps coming up for me is everything that is going on right now looks a whole lot like what is described in the book of Revelations. And the end times, and what keeps coming up for me in all of these tragedies, the floods, the famines, the fires, the droughts, what actually I see ending in those times is separation. In the midst of those tragedies, there is no separation. Nobody's caring who you worship or what your ethnicity is when you're saving somebody's life. And if we could just maintain that place without the tragedy. And how do we do that? Because in the moment of it, the separation is gone.
You know, it's interesting because they're like these two big world views that are going on simultaneously that I know that, you know, you, Rev. Rafe, are all too familiar with. It does look a lot like the book of Revelation. It does. Whether people think of it as metaphor or whether they think of it, you know, as true. And what does that mean? Like, what are the possibilities of that, and what does that mean? And I'm bringing it up to say that this is a challenge, because I think for those of us in the more sort of progressive persuasion, that we see it as the opportunity for a new heaven and a new earth, so to speak. Here, like on this planet. And for so many people, particularly the extreme, you know, fundamentalist Christian evangelical kind, it's a sign of them of something else. It's the sign of them of is a falling apart and a disintegration, pointing to, quote unquote, the end times, which creates a certain amount of excitement within them to even hasten that a bit, because it would be like winning the big lottery of the universe where I get to be around when Jesus comes back. You know, I get to be the one here when Jesus comes to clean all this stuff out and, you know, wipe out all of these people and to, you know, choose the just ones and all the rest of that. So it's interesting because for some it's sparking more compassion, and for others it's hastening up the game of musical chairs, where there's not a seat for everybody.
Mm. And
you want to make sure when the music stops, so to speak, your butt got a chair. Even if you got to knock somebody else off to get one.
Mm.
And the liberal progressives are on the complete opposite end of let's end the musical chairs and make sure there's a chair for everybody so that the music can keep going. Like a completely different paradigm that's there. And more specifically to your question, Reverend, you know, I don't know. I really don't know how in the material world, how gentle, I'll use that word, all of this can be. You know, I don't know. I would like to think, no, not I would like to think, I know, like it says in the Spirit Letters, that drama is optional. I know it isn't necessary for it to be a lot of upheaval. But that which needs to go away or to morph or to transform isn't going down quietly. So I can hear Martin Luther King Jr. now. It's that it's over, that's certain, but the only thing uncertain is how costly the funeral is going to be. And right now we're seeing a really expensive funeral on a lot of fronts. On a lot of fronts. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that no matter what, the human spirit is resilient. And I do think that we're being called up to bigger places and higher places. Any champion, are you trying to say something?
That's hilarious. I think that you heard me. Well, right now I'm doing this deep exploration of whiteness, and I've been listening to this podcast. It's a 14-part podcast called Seeing White. And one of the contributors, an African-American scholar, professor who's at Clemson, said on the podcast the other day, he said, there are no good white people. And I'll explain that. And America was never great.
Yeah, no, I got it. I'm with you.
And so this idea that, make America great again, when it was founded on totally supremacy and to just explain a little bit, the whiteness comment is that white was constructed to eliminate black and to keep black enslaved and disempowered. And so white was constructed, and because before white, people were called by their nationality. They weren't called white. And then it became important it started in Virginia, where they constructed the Virginia Slave Code, and they made whiteness important. And so white was never good. So this idea of good white people doesn't exist. And America being great, there are great people in America, but America as a nation has continued to to put forward racist policies in all of our institutions and governments. So for me, my question is like, as I'm just bombarded with, I mean, I've done anti-racist work for many years, but I haven't gone this deep. And I'm finding it challenging not to see evil. Like, I had reached a point in my life where I didn't really believe evil existed. But I feel that I'm feeling really a sense of separation as I'm going through this material. And I'm working hard to bring myself back. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice.
Yeah. So I hear what the guy is saying, but I'd like to make some distinctions here that I think are necessary. That, you know, I talk about this sometimes, how in the English language, we focus on the adjectives instead of the nouns. So with us, it would be like tomato juice, orange juice, grape juice, pineapple juice, apple juice, you know, and you kind of miss the fact that it's all juice. So in Spanish, you would start with juice, juice of the apple, juice of the orange, juice of the grape, juice of the tomato, but you wouldn't miss the fact that it's all juice. So we kind of do that. So it's the same thing. It's like white people, black people, brown people, that we miss at certain spots. That we're talking about people, and then people of like these different persuasions. So white doesn't really exist. So we can't confuse white with like people. There are real people who have been here and they do exist. But white is a construct. It's not like DNA, it's not genetic. It doesn't really exist. And even what we call white, or what we call race, not white, only accounts for literally less than 1,000th of 1% of all of our DNA, which is why we can exchange blood and body parts and whatnot, because it doesn't mean anything. You know, we're not like different species. You get intermarry, you get, you know, swap body parts. It isn't solid. So what I would say is that the construct of white, and then the way that certain people have been pushed into that construct, has been deeply problematic. There's no question about it. But it doesn't mean that everybody who's been pushed into that construct is bad, or that there's something innately wrong with them because they find themselves a part of this kind of bigger construct. I think what's challenging is this idea about, like, what is the intent and what is the purpose, and to feel like I might be a part of or associated with something that lacked ill intent to begin with, which is the biblical definition of evil. The biblical definition of evil is not like a particular act, but that it lacks the intent to be benevolent, that it lacks the intent to be good. And that's what makes it so-called evil. So yesterday, I'm going to connect two concepts here. So yesterday, I was doing some preparation for a conference that I'm going to be going to week after next in St. Louis called Rolling Away the Stone. And it's this big conference about LGBT people and within a religious context. So they're flying back scores of us. I don't know who's picking up this tab. And then other people can come, and it's a big whole archive project. And I said, you can put me wherever you want to go. And there's one thing that I said that we should do about our stories that I'm doing. But the panel that I got put on was marriage. The marriage panel. And I said, you can put me wherever you want to go. And I hadn't been paying attention to all of the discussions. So I looked yesterday at the questions that are being posed to the panel and how we might refine those questions. And the panel was originally called something like the changing perspectives of marriage. And I am sure that when they were writing it, they were thinking about just like the changing perspectives that would allow marriage equality to be part of the big picture. But I really started asking myself the question of the changing perspectives of marriage. And even though I was a strong marriage proponent, at the end here, I went kicking and screaming into that movement. Thought it was the dumbest thing that the LGBT community could go after, to be honest with you. And in my earlier life, I didn't even believe in marriage. And I didn't believe in marriage because as a construct, just like whiteness, as a construct, marriage was not necessarily a really good thing. That doesn't mean that there weren't like unions and family structures and whatnot, but what we know of is marriage as a legal institution, okay, was about women as chattel, children as chattel, a whole male patriarchal system. I mean, and on and on and on. It was not pretty. It was not good. And yet, somehow it's become the hallmark now of some kind of evolution. So, and I remember struggling with that. Saying, dang, here's this thing that I personally thought we all needed to challenge and maybe like get rid of or create something else. And now I'm about to enter into it. What does this mean? You know, like, what does this say? So I think that there's some honest grappling that we need to do with these constructs and be honest about it. But I think if we get beyond the constructs and start talking about the people, like white people have done as much good as damage. And we'll find that with all groups. The Catholic Church has done as much good as it has damage. That everything kind of has its yin yang, it's good, it's bad, nothing's like exclusively like one or the other. So I would say put it in the balance. It's like put it in the balance. Because anytime we get to self-loathing, anytime we get to self-hating, it denigrates us and decreases our vibratory field. And you know, and I'm here because I've had to grapple with that. African Americans in particular have to grapple with that. I got a lot of white blood in me. You know, that's part of what blew my mind when I first went into the slave castles. It's just it's like it just blew a cork because I didn't know what to do. It was like these two sides within me just like, how could my people have suffered all of this, and how could my people have made anybody suffer all of this? And it, I mean, literally it was like a fuse that just blew between the two polarities. And I think if we part of the difficulty here is that the construct of white itself was designed in such a way as to keep the white race pure. So when we think of white, and when white people are grappling with this stuff and thinking of themselves as white, there might be different ethnicities, but they're seeing themselves pretty sort of homogenous. And white people don't see themselves as part of the multi-ethnic diaspora, which they are. See, Barack Obama is half white. He's just as much white as he is black. From a technical standpoint, but yet he's been like spin off. The construct of whiteness spun him off. But if we think of people and get beyond the construct of the spin off, white people are related to all the rest of us. You don't really have your own race, per se. It's designed that way, but that blood, that DNA strand, it's everywhere. In fact, I am not making this up. This is really true. So one of my buddies I have been friends with the longest, since I was like 16, called me up a couple of days ago. And she did one of those ancestry DNA tests. Her parents are, she's African American, and we've shared a lot in common. And her parents were black, French Canadian. Their father was like a really dark brown skin man. You know, her mother was probably more like my complexion or something like that. And so she calls me up. And if you could have just heard it in her voice, she goes, Deborah, I'm half white. She said, I can't believe this. I'm half white. She just kept saying that. I'm half white. She said, she said, now the other half of me is from, Somalia and like all these different places. She said, I'm even 12% Ashkenazi Jew. She said, what the hell? And the reason why she did the thing in the first place is she was going to plan this world tour and like go to her ancestral lands as like a bucket list. She's turning 70 now. So at the end of the conversation, she's like, well, I guess it's just a bigger trip. I guess I'm going to Scotland. And it wasn't a surprise that the white lineage was in it. But she said 50%. And I remember saying to her just a couple of days ago, I said, you know what? If we all took it Ancestry.com, like DNA test, this stuff would probably be over. When we found out what like is really flowing through all of our blood, it's probably probably would be over. And that being said, I want to commend you, champion. I want to commend you and all of the others who are doing this work. And there's some people I want to hook you up with in the Bay Area, for not just dismissing it and assuming some responsibility for the havoc that this construct has played in the world, and being in that unique position, being within that construct, to be able to do something about it, because it can't be dismantled from the outside. It can only be dismantled from the inside. But if nobody wants to be in it, then it can't be dismantled. Long-winded answer, but I hope it gets somewhere.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting journey, and I think we have to know where we are in order to be able to heal it. And originally when I started, I thought I wanted to reclaim whiteness. And now I'm, in the way that we reclaim words that are used against us. And I don't know, that's still open for discussion, but yeah, it's really interesting work, and thank you. Yeah.
And, you know, as a construct, you might think of redeem as opposed to reclaim. Okay? Because when something's redeemed, it doesn't necessarily have to go on in that form, but there's an investment that's made in buying it back, so to speak, cleaning it up, like doing what's necessary, you know, taking it back to where it came from, and not just let it continue the way that it's been. Just like it's clear to me now how I had to buy a Pentecostal church. I had to buy a Pentecostal church facility because something needed to be redeemed. Redeemed in me, redeemed here. There's a certain healing that takes place. And I don't have the charge on it now that I did when I first came here. So I can move on and I can release. But if we try to move on and release while we still have the charge before we've done the redemption, you can't move on. So the redeeming is a cleaning up. It is a clearing. It is a transformation. But reclaiming has us going backwards. Kind of like, I know what you're saying about language, kind of like that conscious decision of those of us who were both gay and female in the 70s to redeem the word lesbian. You know, at that particular time, it was considered a very foul word, and it still is considered that by many people. But for us, it was very much like reclaiming the word black. When I was a kid, you just say the word black and the fight was on. Because people had been convinced that anything black was inferior. Mm-hmm. And no one wanted to be associated with that. Hence James Brown's, you know, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Mm-hmm. It was redeeming it. So lesbian just literally means from the Isle of Lesbos. It was this beautiful Greek island that women artists were exiled to, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Because the Greeks, at the time of Aristotle and Socrates, they weren't homophobic, but they were very sexist. Like Juliet, for example, was actually played by a boy in Romeo and Juliet, in those kinds of plays, because women were not allowed. So you said, well, what's so bad about being from a female society that was jamming, you know, with artists and you know, poets and culture, and musicians and dancers and intellectuals and writers? And why is it bad to be associated with a place like that? So we consciously chose that name, not about sex at all, not even about relationships, but as a womanist theology of saying it's okay to be that empowered and to be associated with a culture that would allow that kind of empowerment. So we redeemed the word lesbian. It wasn't just like a reclamation, so to speak, but we redeemed it. And if it's going to be used, I think there has to be some kind of stuff like that that's in there in consciousness. Yeah.
You know, going, just looking at my own journey, And as a child, as a fairly young, maybe 10 years old, growing up where there weren't many Black people, I still saw racism around me in ways that other people weren't acknowledged. But at 17, I saw it. And it was a shocker to see that in myself. And so from that point on, I made a conscious, I don't want to say effort, willingness to be aware of those times when those bones of racism show up. And so I was shocked. I mean, I've done so much work that I was shocked when a few years ago I read Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow. And she was talking about, how things have been consciously, the drug wars and whatnot. I thought, how could they have done this without, I pay attention. How could they have done this without my knowing it? And then she brings in, the backroom talks. When quoting Nixon, she says, after he comes in and he says, what are you going to do about the Black cop? And creating this, the drug wars, and we can make them felons, we can, take away there's all sorts of ways we can take away the right to vote. And it was that was shocking to me, but considering other things that I knew about Nixon, and I know there are backroom discussions, I could believe that. But when I found more and more and more and more, when I read about the actual beginnings of the concept of racism, having been thought up by a very white man who I think was some kind of a doctor, but he didn't really have the right bona fides to have really made this concept. But I think it was one of the colonies in Virginia in the 1600s, and this is great. Now we've got something we can use to convince people that they're better than the Blacks. Because you all know that the best are really white. The whiter you are, the better you are. And I feel frustrated, and I also, that more people are not aware of this. But at least more and more people are becoming aware of it. And I think some people just, for whatever reason, have never paid attention. And now they don't want to pay attention. But that's one of the things that frustrates me about this, because it comes up so many times in so many ways, and not just about Blacks, but about the Latinos, how we treated the Native Americans. That we didn't learn in a history book, so a lot of people my age that grew up like I did, white in America, if it wasn't in the history book, it must not be true. Well, I just keep hoping that more people are being willing to put at least one foot on the bandwagon.
Yes. And I'm not trying to, rub salt in a very nasty wound. But I think what we need to understand here about race that makes it different, okay? Prejudice was not new. Slavery, you can find slavery throughout, all of human history. But most of the time when there was slavery, the slaves were brought into the society. They intermingled into the society. In fact, when the Ghanaian president apologized to African Americans, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago now. He was saying that the way that they knew slavery was that it was more like an indentured servitude, and after 7 years, you had to marry into the family. It's like it didn't last forever. They had no idea what was happening to people once they left, you know, like these shores. And the thing here, and like I said, I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound, but if I don't say it, I think we miss it. That white did not create a hierarchy of people, that we're better than them. It's not what it did. Race created a hierarchy of species. This is extremely important, and it doesn't get said enough because it's so hard. It created a hierarchy of species so that white became human. That whiteness and humanity were synonymous. And that anything that wasn't white was subhuman. Almost like a Darwinian thing. Subhuman. So they weren't going around the world capturing Africans because they hated Africans and thought they were like better than Africans. Black people were like coal. They were just a resource, like trees or gold or ivory. But what, they weren't people. I mean, even in the slave trade, I wasn't really conscious of it till I went to the slave councils. They were stripped of clothing from the time they were captured, and they never had clothes again until they were bought somewhere from captivity, all through the oceans, all through and you know, when you see those pictures of the sardines of the slave ships and they're being shackled like sardines, they weren't people. So that's why this racism stuff is so important that we heal. It's so important that we heal, not just to elevate all the non-white people, but the sickness in the soul that it has made of white people to have themselves believe that they are that distant and separate from what the rest of us consider to be humanity. And the onerous burden that puts on the psyche of white people to feel like they've got to be, the translation now is leader of the free world.
Translation.
Yes, that's what we call it now. But it comes out of this same racist consciousness. Like somehow or another, it's on us to determine what's best for the world.
We're not doing it.
But I mean, but it comes from this, it comes from this construct. So it created this continuum, this hierarchy of species that had Africans at the bottom, and the natives were just a notch above, but above so much that they were allowed to have black slaves too, but were considered savage without souls. So this construct, can you feel, had to exist to justify. Because without it, you would suffer cognitive dissonance. Because without it, how could good white people do that to other people? The answer is they weren't. They weren't mistreating people. They weren't people.
Mm.
They were monkeys.
Mm.
They weren't supposed to read and write and do all the rest of this kind of stuff. They were beasts. They were beasts of the field.
It hurts my heart.
Which gives me the right. They could have been cattle. They could have been horses. They could have been, anything. Basically, but they weren't people.
Mm.
So what the battle is now, I want you to really hear it clearly. What the battle is now is not for equal civil rights. The battle is for equal humanity. That's why you hear me say this all the time. That it was a spiritual rights movement, not a civil rights movement, to re-establish our common humanity under the eyes of God. And if we've been created equal under the eyes of God, then all of this discrimination stuff has no justification. It wasn't trying to elevate people out from this lower station. It was to say they already deserve this stuff that's just being withheld from them. See, in other parts of the world, and in other times in history, it was just a caste system. But they were people. They were just at the bottom. But they were still people. The Hebrews were still people. They were allowed in the courts. They were, Daniel was like the head dream teller and whatnot, very well respected. Moses, was very well respected as the Pharaoh's adopted grandson. Everybody knew he was a Hebrew. But they were still human beings. I'm not trying to say one slavery was better than another. I'm just saying that as a construct, this idea that people weren't people,
They were animals.
that's what race brought. That's the slimy thing that race brought. So it became this hierarchy. So it would be like if a human being could consort with a dog and have an offspring, that offspring wouldn't be considered a human being. Not if it's part dog. It's not, that's not a human being. Even if it had some human DNA strand in it, that's not a human. Yeah.
Reverend Rafe says the first step was to dehumanize the other. So the correction, the redemption, must be to reclaim one, humanize one's humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And this is the work. This is the I know it's deep and I know it's harsh but I feel like we keep in all of our public discussions dancing around it and not nailing it. And until we kind of nail it as a construct of what it was meant to create, we can't fathom the magnitude of what the correction needs.
I mean, we were taught this idea of the species.
Right.
When we were in schools.
Yes. But that's why we can have mass incarceration.
Right.
That's why we can have it. Because they're not really human. They're not really people. Of course they can be in cages and you know, what do you do with a dog? You know, if a dog gets out of control and whatnot, you know, you shoot him, you put it down, or you know, you can chain a dog and nobody thinks you're just, that's what you do, you know, they're not like really human. It's like, it's okay for them to live that way. And it's probably like for their own protection and for their own good. You cage the dog up, not because you hate the dog, you cage the dog because you love the dog. And you don't think the dog has sense enough to take care of himself, and he's gonna run out in the street and get hit. So to a certain extent, you're like helping people out because they don't have sense enough to sort of stay out of trouble, you know, and keep themselves sane on their own. So I mean, it's slimy, it's insidious, and I'm not trying to make it just a black or white thing. But that's how we could drop the bombs in Japan.
We didn't think they were human.
They weren't human.
They were dispensable.
They were dispensable. They were a threat. America, what we know of, like as would have never dropped a bomb, like consciously, which is part of the reason why, and I'm going to start like a whole nother discussion, why this saber rattling about North Korea is tied up in this same white racism. It's tied up in the same white racism, the immigration policies, what we're doing in the Middle East. It's tied up to like the not white, and anything that's not Christian isn't like, it's like there's a subhuman. Not Christian is like pseudo religion. It's like there isn't any other religion. So anything else like really isn't religion. It's a belief system, you know, it's all these other things, but you're not really attacking another religion. You get what I'm saying? It's not. There really isn't another religion. Religious freedom didn't really mean other religions. Religious freedom just meant an infinite number of Protestants.
You either are or you aren't.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to.
So I see Ray laughing there. Did you want to comment as we start to close down? Or you just getting ready for your popcorn?
The infinite number of Protestants got me.
Yeah, that's how religious freedom meant. I mean, literally, when I was growing up, interfaith would have meant like Methodists and Pentecostals.
Or even Methodists and Baptists.
That would have been interfaith.
I kind of wanted to get back to
An alphabet soup of Protestants.
Yes, exactly. We're about to close it up.
when my children were in the schools, and I was very active in PTA. I was on the PTA council. As the vice president of the council was a black woman. And one day I was chatting with my neighbor. I don't think she was on the council, but she was very active in the junior high PTA with this and this. And somehow Jean's name came up, and Buffy was just really raking her over. And I said, how can you say things like that about Jean? I said, I know Jean. She's on the council. I work with her. She's intelligent. I have a lot of respect for her. And Buffy came up with something, I can't remember what it was, but all of a sudden I find myself saying, Buffy, that's racism. And she looked at me and she said, I am not racist. She was from Mississippi. She said, I am not racist. She said, we had blacks that worked in our house. We loved our blacks, but they knew not to come to the front. And I thought, to prove my point.
There you
And
go.
it was just so ingrained in people like her from Mississippi.
It's not about hate. People make that mistake. Racism, the isms, they're not about hate. It's about just that, your place.
Right.
You know, you don't hate your dog,
And
but you probably don't want to eat out your dog's dish. You know, I mean, you probably don't want all the dogs in the neighborhood swimming in your pool. You know, it isn't that you hate dogs. It's that there's a pecking order. There's a place. The love relationship is intense. Intense. I mean, that was what Black women were doing. They were raising white babies like their own, suckling off their breasts.
Right.
I mean, it's not a hate
but
thing.
it's their blacks, like Buffett said, we love our.
Well, because that's a part of it. You know, and just we're here now. We're here now. It was a lot to stomach, you know, it's like a lot to swallow. But it just is. And we need to just be careful that we don't keep perpetuating it and this same kind of slimy thing. As though religion is like the only religion. Like the United States is like way up here, and every other nation is kind of like a sub nation, so to speak. I mean, we're seeing it even in the response to Puerto Rico.
Right,
Puerto Rico.
To Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
You know, it was
One of our.
when it's Houston, it's one thing. When it's Puerto Rico, it's another.
Right.
You know, I don't know. You know, we can't. How long we can stay there? And it's not even the military's job to. It's not even the military's job to go there and help. You know, and bring supplies and stuff. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And we just gotta call it out. It's not going to be comfortable, but that's our charge now. It's just to call it out. The gross discrepancies, the not out of anger, you know, not out of judgment. We slip into it unless we stay woke, unless we stay awake. Yeah, unless we stay awake. And there's just a lot to call out now. There's a lot to call out.
you know,
But do it in love to call us up. Not just racist, but to say, hey, we didn't act that way over here. We don't need to act that way over, you know, over there. We don't need to act that way over here. We can do better. With the constant, we can do better. We can do better. We can do better than this. We're better than this. And call us out when we're falling short. The love we're not giving. You know, once again. You know, we can end on the comment because there's going to be another meeting in here. You want to say something, Margaret?
thank you. That's what I want to say, thank you. I have tried to be the best person that I could be. And yet I am so blind to all of this. I know it's true because when you say it, I know it's true. And I think, why? Why did this get so out of control? But on the other hand, because this thing with Trump is just making us have to look at it.
Yes.
We have to look at it. You can't say anymore that you don't know. It's right there in living color. Hello.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for this class today.
Yeah. Well, good. Because the system is designed to make you not know.
Right.
That's part of the privilege. That's what that is the privilege not to know. Because if you knew, you wouldn't stand for it. So it's got to be kept.
So Reverend Ray, are you hearing that she's waking the flock up now? Yeah?
We've been waking the flock up for a while.
More and more.
Yes.
just like the FU sermon, which is really about forgiveness, but it gets people's attention.
Whatever it takes, my brother. Whatever it takes. So let's take a breath. That's what we need to take right now.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of smoke in the air. She's make sure it's safe to take a breath.
Take a breath. So we're going to do what? We're going to give ourselves permission to what? To be all we can be. Amen, amen. So all right, let's sing our way out of here. And thank you everybody for your there's a basket here. Thank you everybody who's been making donations online in my PayPal. I really appreciate it. So I give myself permission to be all I can be. I give myself permission to live passionate and free. I give myself permission to be all I can be. I give myself permission to live passionate and free. And away. Let us take this consciousness and
Multiply it.
And multiply it. All right.
Hallelujah.
Amen, amen.